Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Canto 11 this morning, chapter 7, and the text is 28. Tvam tu kalpa kavirdaksha subhagomrita bhashana nakarta nehase kinchit jadon mata pishachavat tvam tu kalpa kavirdaksha subhagomrita bhashana nakarta nahase kinchit jadon mata pishachavat tvam tu kalpa kavirdaksha subhagomrita bhashana nakarta nehase kinchit jadon mata pishachavat. Please chant. Tvam tu kalpa kavirdaksha subhagomrita dashana nakarta nehase kinchit jadon mata pishachavat. Tvam tu kalpa kavirdaksha subhagomrita bhashana nakarta nahase kinchit jadon mata pishachavat. Tvam tu kalpa kavirdaksha subhagomrita bhashana nakarta nahase kinchit jadon mata pishachavat. Thank you very much for chanting. This is the translation word by word and the purport. They're both by disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Tvam, you. Tu, however. Kalpa, capable. Kavi, learned. Daksha, expert. Subhaga, handsome. Amrita bhashana, having nectarian speech. Na, are not. Karta, a doer. Na ihase, you do not desire. Kinchit, anything. Jada, stupefied. Unmata, maddened. Pishachavat, like a ghostly creature. And the translation for this text 28 is as follows. You, however, although capable, learned, expert, handsome, and most eloquent, are not engaged in doing anything, nor do you desire anything. Rather, you appear stupefied and maddened as if you were a ghostly creature. The purport. Ignorant persons often think that renounced spiritual life is meant for those who are impotent or homely or incompetent in practical worldly affairs. Sometimes foolish people say that religious life is a crutch for those who are not expert enough to achieve a high status in society. Therefore, King Yadu has described the qualities of the mendicant Brahmana in order to show that the Brahmana has taken to renounce spiritual life in spite of great potential for worldly success. The Avadhuta Brahmana is described as being expert, learned, good-looking, eloquent, and in every sense qualified to be a great material success. Still, the Avadhuta has renounced material life and taken to Krishna consciousness. Going back home, back to Godhead for an eternal life of bliss and knowledge is the real work of a human being. The followers of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu simultaneously cultivate their own Krishna consciousness and strenuously endeavor in missionary work to help others become Krishna conscious. Often, foolish persons deride the devotees by saying, quote, "Why don't you get a job?" Close quote. They think that one who is sincerely endeavoring for spiritual enlightenment and who is also enlightening others is not doing anything practical. Foolish materialists will pay millions of dollars to extend their lives by a few weeks or months in a hospital, but they do not appreciate someone endeavoring for eternal life. There is no actual logic in material life. The act of trying to enjoy without Krishna is in itself the culmination of irrationality, and thus we cannot expect to find anything ultimately rational or logical in a materialistic life devoid of Krishna consciousness. Many devotees of Krishna come from wealthy, learned, and influential families, and they take to Krishna consciousness in order to perfect their lives, and certainly not due to lack of opportunity for material advancement. Although sometimes persons in material distress approach the Supreme Lord for help in material life, a real devotee of Lord Krishna voluntarily gives up all types of material enjoyment, knowing that nothing but love of Krishna and service to his lotus feet are the actual perfection of life. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurin Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapsa Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavan Ishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhe Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Padaswami Iti Namine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'll read the translation of the text again. You, however, although capable, learned, expert, handsome, and most eloquent, are not engaged in doing anything, nor do you desire anything, Rather, you appear stupefied and maddened as if you were a ghostly creature. So, in looking at this text, the purport was very interesting. There's a statement that's made by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Some I'm hearing Hridayananda Swami, but I don't know. There's this statement: King Yadu has described the qualities of the mendicant Brahmana in order to show that the Brahmana has taken to renounced spiritual life in spite of great potential for worldly success. So this brings into sharp contrast what is considered a favorable or satisfactory outcome or result from two different points of view regarding a person and his actions. So such results may be in relation to wealth, in relation to fame, in relation to rank in society, etc. So Srila Vishwanath takes King Yadu's listing of the qualities of the Brahmana mendicant. So the first quality that's listed for this Brahmana mendicant is the following: you do not perform any actions. You do not desire anything. So if one begins by looking at action, Lord Krishna draws attention to the necessity of making a distinction between an action and inaction and unauthorized action. That's a distinction that's made by Lord Krishna. And this is how he puts it. This is, of course, from Bhagavad Gita. The intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. So, action can be described as behavior or even habitual conduct, which makes up the habitual actions. So from the spiritual Vaishnava point of view, these habitual actions or work can be categorized into 4 divisions amongst humans. So considering all the possible habitual behaviors that humans form, you can categorize humans into 4 categories. So the actions themselves are shaped according to the particular way of being of each of these 4 categories of humans. So there's a particular way of being, a nature one has. So according to the 3 modes, and this is Lord Krishna explaining it, according to the 3 modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the 4 divisions of human society are created by me. And although I'm the creator of this system, you should know that I'm yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. So just reinforcing that idea, these 4 divisions in society, but Krishna is saying he's created them. So the question arises, is success, because this was something implied in this verse, is success measured by crass materialistic standards that the world establishes, or is it in terms of the individual successfully becoming the sort of person he or she wants to be? So that's the question that can be asked. How do you measure success? So the crass materialistic standard of wealth may be measured by money. It's a very crass way of measuring success. Or objects that cost a lot of money to buy or to replace. So that's how you could measure success in the crass materialistic kind of way. such as one's land, one's home, one's vehicle, one's jewelry, one's clothing. So the Bhagavad Purana lists categories of wealth or prosperity that can help an individual find work that energizes and inspires one, such that one can describe one's life as being rich. Because we're looking at, that question that was asked, you're going by the gross materialistic standard, or you're going by, making choices that move you towards where you want to be as an individual. So this is very interesting. This comes from Urmila Dasi writing in Career Dharma. It's her book, where she brings up this point that there's categories of wealth or prosperity that can help an individual use work that energizes and inspires them, so that they can actually describe themselves as being wealthy. They're actually quite rich because they've found work. So the actions, the category, the habitual actions, the particular work that energizes and inspires them. So they do, or because she does the book with somebody else called Ruchira Datta, so Urmila and Ruchira Datta, they do a breakdown of wealth. So there's the wealth of power and control. So we're going to look at that one. So this implies that there's a nature that's connected to wanting to lead. There's a leadership quality. So therefore, leadership actions could be leading a community, leading a country. It could be so if it's leading a country, obviously it's in the realm of governance. It could be leading in a business category. So the work field is that of resources, that's how she calls it. Like there's categories that are used by Krishna, Sanskrit terms, but she's using these English words for those categories, and I found it very, very, very nice. And that particular leadership nature, finding something in the work field that allows for that leadership nature to come out, energizes the individual, because they're using that natural part of their nature to engage people in meaningful work. And they help have people receive what they need. So it could be financially, their maintenance, etc. So this is what's giving that kind of energy to an individual with that leadership nature. So some persons, they perform actions that generate wealth for others. So this is also in the category of having that leadership nature. For example, an individual may help others gain power or control. So they may be in a position of control, but they help others to gain power or control and autonomy. An example is given. This is their example. I thought of something else, which I'll come to in a minute. An example is given of coaches for a rugby team. So they advise the captains of the team to take up a challenge, for instance. So they're in leadership capacity, but they're assisting others to actually develop their leadership. So they tell the coaches tell the captains of the team how to build up the teams, so that teams have strength and stamina, because obviously you want to win your particular tournaments. So they help the captains to grow in leadership, wisdom, and authority. The thing that came to my mind was in the field of governance. So one may have a president of a country, but that president will actually then elect somebody to be in charge of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So they're then giving encouragement to somebody else in a leadership position so that person can grow in their particular way that they use their leadership nature and the actions that they can perform through investigations, etc. But the president himself may actually have a different kind of leadership nature that is more in terms of empowering many persons to take up work that is of a leadership nature, but in different categories. So in the broader sense, you could say that there's two classes of persons. Those, and this is Srila Prabhupada, so from the spiritual perspective, there's a category of persons that are full of polluted material things, these are his words, within their hearts. And the second class is, and these are his words, materially free. So very interesting. In both cases, becoming the person that one is requires following principles of regulation. So you have to regulate your life in order to take that path of becoming the person you'd like to be. So making that kind of choice and following principles of regulations, things that allow you to keep your life ordered, is what's allowing that consciousness of the transcendental nature of the Lord to be very prominent. So this is the spiritual perspective. So that there can be a gradual cleansing of consciousness, that polluted heart full of material things, it can actually be cleansed. So that's persons in that first category. Or rather, those are persons who are acting as examples for persons in the first category. So the field of activity is engaged in for the sake of Krishna. So that's taking the spiritual perspective in Srila Prabhupada's classification of two classes of beings. Because he's simplifying it in one sense, very broad. Now, the mendicant Brahmana in this particular verse, he's understood by King Yadu to not be performing action. Because that was what we've been looking at, the actions you can perform, and I isolated looking at leadership-related actions. And King Yadu's noticing that this Brahmana, he's not performing actions. And Srila Prabhupada explains that to understand action according to the mode of being of a person and to understand Krishna consciousness, one has to learn one's relationship with the Supreme Lord. So, one who has learned perfectly that there's a relationship with the Supreme Lord, he knows that every living being is a servant of the Lord. And consequently, he acts in that kind of consciousness, that the other people around him are also serving the Supreme Lord. So it's on a different level of functioning when actions are performed. So this gives a clue about the Brahmana mendicant. A person acting in Krishna consciousness is free from the bonds of karma. So you're not hemmed in. So you're performing actions according to your nature, but you're hemmed in because there's reactions coming from previous actions that have been done. So your life has already been shaped according to karma, what those reactions are that you have to endure or experience. But for the Brahmana mendicant, because he's acting in Krishna consciousness, and it's the case for persons acting in Krishna consciousness, having made that choice as individuals, what sort of individual they want to become, they're free from the bonds of karma. And so they're not enjoying or suffering the bonds of karma. So there's a whole category of unwanted things that persons with that very polluted heart have to deal with. This is Srila Prabhupada's categorization. So Krishna explains the functioning of one in transcendental consciousness. So this is how he explains it, because we're trying to get insight into how King Yadu is recognizing this Brahmana who's not performing actions. So this is how Krishna puts it. For somebody in transcendental consciousness, one who sees inaction, one who sees inaction, and action, inaction, is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position. Although engaged in all sorts of activities. So anyone engaged in the process of cleansing consciousness via service to Lord Krishna can be known to be without desire for trying to, just please their senses. So hence the Brahmana doesn't desire anything. He's in that state of consciousness that he's not working to fulfill something according to his nature, and therefore also how the senses operate in relation to nature. He just is without desires for gratifying his senses, so he doesn't desire anything. And Srila Vishwanath continues. So this is from his commentary. And he's talking as though King Yadu is addressing this Brahmana. You are capable of doing things, and you have knowledge, skill, and a good body. So everything's in order. There's a body that can perform work. There's skills. There's knowledge. So in the field of ideas, so this is Urmila's other categorization. There was the field of governance. Now there's also the field of ideas. So persons who fall in the field of ideas. So the work field of action relates to somebody who falls in the category of the field of ideas, which would be this Brahmana, because he's described as having knowledge and skill, and he's known to be a Brahmana, so he's in the field of ideas. The work field of actions that he could be performing, or somebody in that Brahmanical category could be performing, is related to building educational programs or creating instructional materials. And there may be a desire to play with language in pursuit of the truth. So that's what the person wants to pursue, who's made that choice to cleanse the heart. So persons in this category of ideas, which would be this Brahmana, they have a tendency to see patterns in ideas, relationships, and systems. They look for patterns. So the skill present in persons in this field of work may be to perform actions related to study and research. So that would be if we were looking at the kind of actions that somebody in this category of field of ideas, such as this mendicant Brahmana, what kind of actions they could be performing according to how their nature functions, how their thinking intelligence functions, what skills they have. So Srila Vishwanath gives a picture for one with the attributes of a Brahmana. And so this is, again, as though it's King Yadu talking. He says, you can desire a beautiful wife. You can speak to anyone because you speak nicely, but you remain like a dumb person, not doing anything. So this is how he's addressing to this person who falls in that category of the field of ideas. That would be his work. So this is how he's been addressed by King Yadu, and Srila Vishwanath putting it in his words. So there's Lord Krishna explaining this idea, and he puts it this way. One is understood to be in full knowledge, whose every endeavor, like every action, is devoid of desire for sense gratification. So every action one's performing, if it's done with that consciousness that it's not just to satisfy, something I like, how I like to see, how I like to taste, how I like to hear things, but rather it's done with the consciousness that it's for Krishna, because this is Krishna explaining. One is understood to be in full knowledge whose every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He's said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions of work have been burnt up by the fire of perfect knowledge. So that's why the particular individual who's making their choice to become the individual they want to be, but they're choosing to actually do that cleansing process of all that material stuff in the heart. Srila Prabhupada's two categories, the one having that and the one not wanting to have that, is actually pursuing work but not doing it just according to what their senses are dictating. They actually are working in a higher state of consciousness, and because of doing that, the reactions that come from the work, they get burnt up because they're developing perfect knowledge. That perfect knowledge is coming because of their connection with Lord Krishna. He's giving the understanding all along of what's taking place. So this statement of Lord Krishna reflects on King Yadu, because he's the one who's perceiving this in the Brahmana. He's understanding. He's understanding the actions of a person in Krishna consciousness, or this Brahmana choosing inaction. Because remember, the particular thing was that even though he appears to be in a state of inaction, he's performing actions. There's choices that are being made for the cleansing of the heart. So there's a great deal of action going on, but it's not visible to the external world. So just by virtue of the fact that a person is free from any sense gratification activities, and King Yadu had understood this by listing the activities of the Brahmana, it can be understood that such a person has burnt up the reactions of work. So that's what we're looking at here by seeing this Brahmana. Because he has perfect knowledge of his position, of being that eternal servitor of Lord Krishna. So the truth of the matter is that the Brahmana is actually learned because he has attained that perfect knowledge, because that was what Lord Krishna gave as the definition. And he's to be understood to be in full knowledge. He's actually free from being bound to the reactions of his actions. And this is only possible for one in Krishna consciousness. So he's doing everything for Krishna, whatever actions he's performing. He's acting out of pure love for the Lord, and therefore he's got no attraction to the results of his actions. So Srila Prabhupada expands this idea. He says he's not even attached to his personal maintenance. Everything is left to Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things, because generally that's what happens when you're dealing with the material world. You want to gain something, you want to look after it, but here's this person. He's not anxious to secure things, nor to protect things that are already in his possession. So such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reaction of good and bad. So it's as though he were not doing anything, because that's how he's described. He's not doing anything. But it's because he's free from that reaction that's either good or bad because of the actions that are being performed, not with that focus on gaining something or gaining a particular result. And Lord Krishna explains it this way: abandoning all attachment to the result of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive actions, although he's engaged in all kinds of undertakings. We don't know all the things that the Brahmana is doing in terms of his, his development of ideas and concepts, etc. It will emerge as the conversation goes on, because that is his field of work. But we understand that he's not doing it with some fruitive motive. And that particular verse, which is so significant to this particular analysis by King Yadu of the Brahmana, I'll read the Sanskrit as Bhagavad Gita 4:20. Tvakva karma phala sangam nitya tripto nirashraya karmani abhipravritopi naiva kinchit karoti sa. So again, abandoning all attachment to the result of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive actions, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. So we're going to find out how he's processing internally, but that's actually what's going on in this particular analysis by King Yadu, and trying to look more closely at what the implications are and what this position is of this mendicant Brahmana. If there's any question related to this particular section or some thought that comes that could expand our discussion, please feel free.
You hear the ideals. You hear the ideals that is described here, and you highlighted, from the verse of the explanations of the Bhagavad Gita, that the position of renouncing fruitive work and also basically engaging in don't have to have any type of duties to perform, but being focused on one's Krishna conscious activities, like that. Meaning, that one is absorbed in I don't know, cultivation of knowledge. I think one of the last sentences that you expressed, in the presentation. Anyway, that position of not performing any work. We have seen so many times, at least I have seen, I'm sure, Jitendra can remember so many cases too through the years, of immature devotees taking to that instruction and taking to that position of I don't have to do any work, I'm basically cultivating, I'm internalizing, and this idea of internal devotion type of thing. So it can be very easily misconstrued or misunderstood. What are the proper way to see this? In other words, that there is the ideal that ones have to be completely self-satisfied and renounce and being able to give up fruitive work. And then there is the interim place in which most people are, according to their nature, that they have to perform some sort of work. And it's something that is also emphasized in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna emphasizes in performing one's duty according to one's nature. No one can live in this world without performing duties, Krishna says. And at the same time, all that is supposed to lead to the abandon, the renunciation of all duties. So that whole process is not easy to understand by most common people and even devotees, you know. So, what can you say about that?
Well, one understands that there's a nature, and one understands that actions have to be performed. And there's that choice that's made. How are you going to measure your success? So if you're a gross materialistic person with all the material stuff and desires sitting in the heart, how Srila Prabhupada puts it, then you're going to go down performing actions, looking for the results that you're looking for that are measures of success. If, on the other hand, you're making the choice to become a person that is self-realized, understanding that one's real self is the soul, and the particular perfection or success taking to that path is one of losing that desire for getting results and claiming material possessions and all the ill feeling that goes along with that kind of materialistic path, then one is obliged, as you pointed out, that Krishna says one has to perform one's duty, so one is performing actions. It's just that the consciousness is different. So you brought up that persons may prematurely think they're in a position where they have given up all that desire for results, or they may think that they've now been successful to cleanse their heart, but in actual fact, they may not be in that position. So it's often very difficult to be completely objective about oneself, because there may be a capacity to understand one's nature in relation to the work one needs to perform, and therefore one is performing the correct actions or habitual actions according to work, whether it's in, as Urmila puts it, the field of ideas, the field of governance, leadership, the field of resources, being a business kind of person, or in the field of artistry, being an artistic kind of person. Still, it requires external advice and somebody in a higher Krishna conscious position to point out to somebody where they how much ground they still need to cover. It's very difficult to be objective about oneself. But a person who's actually traversed the path of becoming self-realized can actually point out to somebody on that path where they're on that path and which direction they need to go, so that there isn't some a fabricated idea of their position. So it requires somebody who's already crossed the path to help, practically speaking.
We should say one more thing before passing the mic. Yes, just remembering Srila Prabhupada explaining that the idea of renouncing something that you couldn't get, is silly. That, the frustration, I may be completely frustrated that although I desire a particular riches or opulence and I work for it, but there's no way for me to get it. So that failure, then I renounce wealth, or I renounce this thing that I never had. So, so that is that is something that one have to see is as a matter of honesty, and to be able, as you say, sometimes we may not be very what's the word, objective in seeing oneself, so they may be a not very honest outlook of my own position. Um, but what we're going to see with this Avadhuta Brahmana is that it took a whole process for him to get where he's there. You know, it took for him to be completely baffled by material miseries to come to that position of understanding, you know, and processing and learning and being able to take lessons from so many gurus, even in nature like that. So it's quite a powerful example that is going to be, that is not just like, okay, yes, I'm renounced now, but there's a whole process that I have to go through. And it was not easy. It was not something, okay, you know, now I'm in the right path, so I can go, you know, doing this, how you say this, skippity. No, yeah, so.
Jitendra has something.
Thanks for the very analytical presentation of action and inaction. What I'm trying to think, is that in chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita?
See if I put the...
Chapter 6, okay, okay. Yeah, a few things came to mind. Did you ever hear the expression, I don't know the whole complete sentence, but it says, although they are avaricious, you know, desiring wealth, there's still room for them to grow spiritually, you know.
Oh, what an encouraging statement.
Yeah, and then the Brahmins say austerity is the real wealth, you know. And then renunciation through wisdom. But a lot of people are, you know, like in America here, you know, there was a song that went, making you think you're the one to do the things that have never been done. Meanwhile, life goes on all around you. But you're so concerned with your own little circle of thinking that you can't go beyond that, you know, and then they kind of built it in the materialistic society that, you know, it's a consumer society, and they just want to keep the machine of economics going, so they're, you know, just offering people so many allurements, you know, it's endless, right? You know,
well, that's what fits in perfectly, that point that you made, that persons get offered allurements, because if the consciousness is to get results, then that's what a perfect match. That's exactly what's going to maintain a materialistic lifestyle or a materialistic outlook, and the choices that go along with that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfectly matched.
The conditioned soul is hankering and lamenting, and in the three modes of material nature are compared to like a smorgasbord or a buffet. Oh, let me have a little of this, a little of that, but they never tire of the sense gratification. So their whole life is based on sense gratification, and they, you know, they're totally entrapped. And of course, we had the five figures of action: the place, the endeavor, the Supreme Lord, the time, and the individual himself. If you think that you're the soul doer of your activities, you're misled because you're not analytically understanding the 5 figures of action. And this is another example of wealthy people and how they have no boundaries on what they'll buy. Like this fella that was just caught in Mexico, the big drug lord. I just found out that they buried him in a solid gold coffin. So they have so much money, they don't know what to do with it. And I've heard that some of these leaders have solid gold toilets. So what is your values, people are starving all over the place, and they're so concerned with their own little world. Ahamameti, I, me, and mine. They can't go beyond. The rich person has no empathy for the poor person because they haven't suffered. But a rich person that was poor, he can empathize with poor people and try to help them through, with his wealth. And then I remember Prabhupada was in Mayapur in a little hut when they were first starting out. And, he was encouraging the devotees to build Mayapur, to what it, like the planet of Vedic planetarium and stuff, which is, he encouraged Ambarish in that way. But then Prabhupada said, we don't really need all this stuff, but to attract them, because they're so attracted to all these things that will make it glorious, so we can maybe attract all. But we're happy in the simple hut. And somebody sent me a picture of that hut, and I remember seeing that hut. It's a straw hut in Mayapur. Did you ever see that?
I have not seen the picture.
You've heard of it? Yeah. So I thought that was humble dwellings, for thinking, so those are a few of the things that came to mind, but,
Thank you, Jitendra. Yes, actually, one of the things you brought up stimulated a thought, talking about the persons on that path of crass material acquisition. So mentioning, the drug lord being buried in a solid gold coffin. Yesterday I got shown pictures, like a beautiful archive of deities that are in Hungary, where the deities have solid gold items. So Krishna has a solid gold waist chain. There's some sort of, I don't know if you would use the word bracelet, but an arm cuff that's up here that's worn by Srimati Radharani, that's solid gold, and it's to ward off, and it's got different stones, it's to ward off evil. Srimati Radharani has a solid gold tray on which there's kumkum powder, some perfume, a little solid gold brush that's for applying, if she needs some makeup, and I forget what else, a few items. So these were solid gold items that are permanently the deities, that never come off the altar. They remain on the deities, or they're by the deities. So that was such a wonderful thing to actually see this whole archive in this temple in Hungary, this great care that's taken, the value that's placed on the deities, and that they have the most valuable objects that are permanently with them.
This is in Hungary?
In Hungary.
Oh, so you've seen this?
I got exposed to an archive of pictures that were taken by the temple president in Naperville, because she's been very attracted to the dressing style of the deities in Hungary, and so she, long ago when Radhashama Sundar came, 15 years before they were installed, she was talking about Srimati Radharani just having a central I forget what the term is. It's sort of a curved stone that comes here, so there's not like elaborate crown or anything, just this little piece over here. She was so inspired that that was how she was dressed in Hungary. So she's had like a great attraction to the style of the deities. And then finally, because of the initiation of her son in Hungary, she actually went to that temple and got to speak to each of the pujaris, what they do and how things are kept for the deities. And so she made albums of pictures connected to the different categories, how they do the worship, what the paraphernalia of the deities is, what sweets are offered to the deities. So in that temple, it's so intricate, the worship, that the sandeshta is made on a daily basis and matches the color of the outfit of the deities of that day.
This is the ISKCON temple.
ISKCON, yes.
Yeah, and then I also heard that Prabhupada said that Krishna consciousness is for those who are materially exhausted. Mm-hmm. And then it says that the karmis, the gross materialists, they're the most dissatisfied members of society. Mm-hmm. And then there's the aesthetics, the Brahmins, so the ones go for the real wealth, austerity, is the Brahmins, because they see the bigger picture, renunciation through wisdom.
Yeah, so that sort of ties in with the idea presented by Urmila in Korea Dharma, where if the individual is making the choice on the side of becoming the person they'd like to be, as opposed to just like the materialistic route, then actually because they're getting satisfaction out of using their nature, there's a sense of wealth. So the wealth doesn't have to be a gross material object. It's actually an internal satisfaction and energized feeling because one's performing work that's in line with one's nature. And of course, ideally, one is also in that category of Srila Prabhupada, that one is choosing to cleanse the material stuff from the heart. So actually one is also functioning on that level of Krishna consciousness. So if you combine the two, how powerful that inevitably the satisfaction has to be there. One's energized in one's work, and there's the satisfaction because there's the connection to Lord Krishna. So what a perfect combination.
Yes.
Yeah, it's quite incredibly wonderful that there's that possibility.
That's why it's good to get the whole picture.
Yes, exactly. So Vaishnava Sevananda had something, but he didn't get right. He, I guess, had some service, so he was not able to ask or say what he wanted to say. But thank you, everybody, for your very, very kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.